in the chat, I've dropped a link to a folder on Google Drive that has some resources we'll be going through related to the personal insight questions. So go ahead and click on that. You should be able to access the Transfer English PDF with all of the information about the questions, the other resources document, personal insight examples, and the Prezi I'm going to be going through for today. So go ahead and just spend a minute right now clicking on that, making sure you can access it. And if you are having trouble seeing anything, just let me know, either unmute or write in the chat, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. Okay, so this is what the folder should look like that you're taking a look at. And you can click on the Transfer English document at the top. And I'm going to just quickly go through that with you. Let me make sure that's sharing correctly. Okay. So this is the document that the UCs share about the personal insight questions. And this is really the foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to go through each of these questions and give you a chance to sort of brainstorm and think about potential responses. And we'll also talk about the best ways to respond to these questions. So you can look over that for a minute, and then I'll introduce myself and we will get started. All right. So with that, I'll actually pull up this Prezi. Okay, let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Cool. All right, so I'm Dr. Kacie Willis. I teach English at Hancock. Mostly teach 101 and 101 with 112 and 103 critical thinking classes. So you might see me as you work through your general education requirements. I am very familiar with these questions because I filled them out myself many years ago now. I did the IGETC plan and ended up transferring to Chapman University, which had many similar questions to what the UC asks for. But I also applied to and was received or accepted at UCI. So I'm really familiar with these. And so beyond this workshop today, I'm happy to answer any questions, obviously, through the workshop. But if you have any questions after, I'll put my email up at the end and also my Writing Center hours. So you're welcome to stop by anytime and talk to me about your essay responses. After I went to Chapman University, I got a BFA in creative writing there. I have a master's in English from Cal State Long Beach, so I'm also very familiar with the Cal States. And I got my PhD in English at UC Riverside. So I did ultimately end up going to a UC. So any questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat. Raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask. This is very informal. And also if something, again, comes up later, feel free to reach out to me, either via email or stopping by the Writing Center. Okay, so we will get started here. This workshop was created by two of my colleagues. Their names are listed there. Some of the goals for the workshop today: we're going to review all of these questions so that you're very familiar with them and you feel comfortable working on your responses. We'll share some essay hacks, so things to avoid specifically in responding to these. We'll start brainstorming some potential responses to the questions that you choose. And I can answer any questions you have. I also have the folder I've shared with resources that has specific examples of successful essays in them, as well as other potential helpful resources for you moving forward. Okay, so we're going to start by watching this short video about the questions.
Okay, you're about to start the personal insight questions for the UC undergrad application. Stressful, I know. So here are some tips on what the questions are about and what they cover.
What are the personal insight questions? And what kind of topics will they be covering?
The personal insight questions are about getting to know you better. We want to hear about your accomplishments, talents, interests, and experiences. All the things that make you a great UC applicant. This is just one part of the application we consider when making our admission decision. But it's really important because it provides context for the rest of your application. You can express who you are and what matters to you, not only in how you respond to the questions, but also through your selection of questions to answer. That doesn't mean that some questions are better than others. We want you to choose the questions that resonate with your own experiences. There are 8 questions to choose from, Freshman applicants will pick 4 questions to answer. Transfer applicants will choose 3 questions to answer, plus 1 required question.
So which ones do I pick? Does it matter?
You choose which questions you want to answer, but you should select the questions that feel most relevant to your circumstances. Remember, we want to learn about your life experience so we can better understand you as a UC applicant. All questions are given equal consideration in the application review process, which means there is no advantage or disadvantage to choosing one question over another. Your responses will not hurt you. They can only enhance our understanding of you as an applicant.
Well, I'm not really sure what the UC campuses are looking for. Is there anything specific?
There is no right or wrong way to answer these questions. It's about sharing your personality, background, interests, and achievements in your own words, in your own unique voice. The best responses are those that are authentic and best represent who you are.
So I'm not really the best writer. Do I need to worry about my writing and my vocabulary?
The personal insight questions are not a writing test, but you should be sure to give yourself plenty of time to prepare and revise your answers. Typos, spelling errors, and grammatical mistakes are distracting and can get in the way of what you're trying to communicate. We know you're creative and passionate, and we want your answers to be the start of a dialogue between you and UC. When it comes time to write, just remember, use your own voice and proofread your work. And then proofread it one more time.
All right, I think I got it. I'm ready to get started. But where do I go for more information?
Give yourself plenty of time. Start working on the personal insight questions as soon as you can. Remember, this is just one of many things we consider when we review your application. Your responses can only add value to the application. Go to our admissions website, which has the questions, along with worksheets, writing tips, and suggestions for how to get started. Relax, use your own voice. There is no need to try to get the attention of the reader. You already have it. So take a deep breath, give it your best shot, and know that no decision is ever based on the personal insight responses alone.
Okay, so hopefully that was helpful in terms of just giving you a little bit of context about these questions. I think it can be sort of intimidating sometimes when people say there's no right or wrong answer, because there obviously is some sort of answer that not necessarily answer they're looking for, but types of responses they're looking for. So hopefully today in going through these questions, we'll talk about how to format your responses, the kind of information to include that will be what is most appealing to the UCs. So you have that file, the Transfer English file. That's yours. You can keep, you can go through it. That has some suggestions on it too. But the link is there again if you need it. Okay, so just to review, there's 4 total questions. 1 general essay that everyone needs to answer. We'll go through that one together. And then 3 additional essays that you choose for yourself. So there's a list of 7, you choose 3 of those questions. And each response is limited to 350 words. So it's not very long. So you definitely need to really focus on getting to the point as quickly as possible. And again, we'll talk about that today. So just some things to avoid, starting with a quote. This is just a general pitfall of essays. Happens a lot. Students find an inspirational quote online or one that they like and think that's a good way to start. But when you have so few words to communicate what you're trying to communicate to the university, you want to make sure that all those words are yours. So starting with a quote takes away that opportunity and can often take away a lot of the words that you could then use to communicate what you need to. Avoid sharing negative stories that are not coupled with reflections. So at least one of the questions I think can lend itself, it asks about some struggles that you've gone through. So that can lend itself to a more negative story, obviously, but it's really important that that's coupled with a reflection on that story. Avoid procrastinating. So it can be easy to put these things off to the last minute. But it's really important that you spend the time to draft and revise these responses. Personal narrative and personal responses to questions can seem like things we don't need to spend as much time on, but to craft them really well and effectively, they need time. So some helpful things are to draft your responses. Hopefully we'll get some drafts out in the next hour or so of at least a couple of the answers. And then to go from there, revise it, maybe go visit the writing center, ask one of your professors if they'd be willing to look over your responses. I know most of the professors in the English department are definitely willing to do that, but also anyone who's working in the writing center can be really helpful with this process too. Revise it again, make sure that you proofread. You don't want random typos in your response because it just shows that it was rushed. So keeping all these things in mind and definitely giving yourself the time to write really effective responses is essential. So some tricks, now that we've gone over things to avoid, here's some things that you want to try and do. You definitely want to use evidence in the form of personal stories. You want to get as specific as possible because you have to remember these people don't know you. So anytime you're telling a story, you need to provide context and you need to provide specific details. Use dialogue and description, show versus tell. If you remember learning how to write narratives at some point in school, the thing that's always emphasized is that you want to show your reader versus telling them. So if you're saying that you are a great communicator with other classmates and with other faculty on campus, you want to show through a specific example how you do that versus just telling them that you do that. Because anyone can tell a story or say that they can do something, but if you can show with specific examples from your experience, your application will be much stronger. Use a variety of sentence types. This is something that, again, I think comes with revision. It probably won't come out in the first draft, but it's something you can think about as you draft these responses. Only tackle one topic per essay. So again, 350 words is kind of a long paragraph. It's barely an essay. It's not long. So you want to make sure that each response is really focused on one key point you're trying to make. Try and share information that isn't already evident in your application. Maybe you have great grades, but your application so far hasn't showed your involvement with the community. So this could be an opportunity to do that. Start early. Like I said, don't procrastinate on this. Get started right away and make sure that you edit and revise. And the intro is especially important. That really strong topic sentence to each of these responses will really help keep you on track and guide your response and also show the reader like where you're headed with each response. Okay, so with that, we're going to start with the general question. So the general question is, please describe how you have prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upper division courses once you enroll at the university. So I'm going to have you do a little exercise right now. You're going to spend about 3 minutes making a list of all the things you've done to prepare for your major. So this might include research, might include work experience, volunteer experience. Maybe you're involved in a specific club that's related to your major. Maybe your church has some sort of program that's connected to your major. There's a lot of different ways you can approach this, but the goal is to provide specific examples that show that you are prepared to succeed in this major at a UC. So I'm going to give you a few minutes now. If you have questions or want to comment, just unmute yourself or raise your hand or put it in the comment box. But I'm going to give you a little bit of time now to sort of brainstorm what you've been doing to prepare for this major. Okay, does anyone have any examples they want to share or any questions about this response? And if you have an example, you can throw it in the chat too. I can start by giving my example. I remember answering this question. I wanted to major in English and creative writing, and specifically focus in creative writing. And so I talked about the magazine my friends and I had created in high school that I edited and that I wrote for. And it was a small circulation, but it showed that like I took initiative and that I was really invested in improving my writing. I also talked about the work I was doing on my writing and the GPA I had in my English classes, to show that I was prepared to succeed in upper division courses specifically, because I was already doing well in the lower division courses. And I was spending extra time outside of school working on my writing, and publishing, even if it was just for family and friends. Does anyone have any examples? All right, well, we can come back to that. Okay, so we will move on to some of the optional questions. So for the rest of the questions, you're going to choose 3. So we're going to go through each one, and I'm going to give you some time to brainstorm how you might respond to each one. And then at the end, we'll go back and you'll choose which ones you are most likely to respond to ultimately. So the first optional question, or the first option for your other question, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. Okay, so for this one, for the next few minutes, I want you to write 3 keywords that describe a good leader. After that, try and think of a time when you were that type of leader. So whatever choice of words that you use, think of a specific example of how you enacted those leadership skills. And you don't necessarily need to write in full sentences or anything right now. This is just to jog your memory and to get some specific examples going. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then I can hear from you what your thoughts are. Okay, so hopefully you got some thoughts down. Would anyone like to share any keywords they thought of that make a good leader? Could unmute or put it in the chat.
I said being empathetic.
Great. That's a great example. Do you have a specific example of a time you were a leader in that way?
I remember in high school we would have like tours for the incoming freshmen. So it was easy to understand how like the incoming freshmen were feeling and like all the emotions. So yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful example. And you can talk about how remembering that feeling helped you respond to them in effective ways, and maybe to like show them the things that they needed to see and understand about the school. Wonderful. Anyone else? So I might say, so when I applied to my undergrad degree, I was in charge of a youth group at my church. And so I might say being organized is a really important quality of a leader, listening and good communication. And then I could talk about having to set up meetings, plan trips, and listen and effectively communicate with the younger high school students that I was working with. So that would be one example. Right. Any other thoughts on this question before we move on to the next one? Okay, well, hopefully you got some ideas down. And again, you do only have to choose 3. So if this one isn't necessarily speaking to you, that's okay. Just get some thoughts out, and then hopefully another one will resonate a little bit more with you. And at the end, if you have questions or want to run anything by me of like which response might be the best for you to work on, I'm happy to talk about that too. Okay, second option. Every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So take a few minutes now, make a list of anything creative that you do. It doesn't necessarily need to be artistic. For example, I'm super into Legos. I feel like that's my creative outlet of late. I just built the Office Lego set, and it was really, really fun. And so maybe something like Legos, maybe you like to build things, maybe you like to garden. There's a lot of different ways that creativity can be expressed. It's not necessarily like painting or drawing or things like that. Maybe you're into music. Maybe you like to make your own Spotify playlists, and that's a creative outlet for you. So take a little bit of time now and write down some ideas about how you express your creative side. All right. Does anyone have an example or any thoughts or questions they want to share? When I was doing my applications, this one was both easy to answer and also very relevant to what I wanted to do. So I made sure to answer this sort of question. I wrote poetry, and so I would talk about how writing poetry was also a way for me to connect with my community and with my friends and family, because I would often write poems for people or collaborate with some of my friends who are also artistically inclined. And I would write poetry and they would put it into like some sort of art piece. I had one friend who did performance art at the time, so we would collaborate a lot. So I would probably try and answer this question, not just with, oh, I'm interested in writing poetry, I write poetry, but like why I do that, and what it accomplishes for me and how it connects me with other people. So I think rather than just, if you do decide to answer this question, instead of making it a list of all the creative things you do, try and think about the motivation behind the creative things, how they connect with other people, maybe how they connect with your community, and if you want, even how they connect with your intended major. And even if you're majoring in the sciences or the social sciences, I think there's a way that creativity can connect with those things too. So really trying to think the purpose of your creative endeavors also. Okay, any other thoughts or questions about this one before we move on? All right, okay, let's go to the third option. So this one has 3 and 4. So we'll start with 3. So what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? So notice even in the question, this is asking for specific examples. So how have you grown? How has your relationship to your skills and your talent changed? So take a few minutes now, make a list of any talents or skills that you have. And maybe jot down some thoughts about how these things have changed over time or how your relationship to something has changed over time. Okay, so I'll start by sharing how I would answer this. So for me, obviously I was applying to major in English and creative writing, but also writing was just my best skill. And so I would also share, though, that this was not something that came naturally or easily to me. I really, really struggled with writing all through junior high school. It was a tremendous struggle. I was not doing well with it. And I really had to work at it every single day. But through that struggle, I became really good at it, and became much more confident in my abilities. And ultimately in high school, won a couple of essay contests as a result of all that hard work. So I would definitely use that in response to this question, because it shows that I really had to grow and develop the skill, and that took effort. And also that I had evidence of that effort through the essay contest that I had won. And again, it still relates back to like, what have I done to prepare for this major? Well, I've worked really hard at my writing. Anyone want to share or have any questions about how you might respond to this question?
I can't think of any talent or skills, and I'm a sociology major. So I don't know, like I'm stuck on like what kind of talents or skills.
Yeah, so I think maybe talent, we oftentimes think of these things as like singing, dancing, writing, but it could also just be like, are you a good communicator? Are you good at listening to other people? Listening is a tremendous skill, right? Maybe you're good at keeping things really organized. Maybe you're the person in your friend group that organizes all the events that everyone goes to. Maybe you're good at throwing parties. Maybe you're a really good cook. There's a lot of different ways, I think, to approach this question. And sociology is all about, you have to do a lot of listening to other people and a lot of communicating. And a lot of the work in sociology is ethnographic. So it means that you have to be out in the community and engaged in some way. And oftentimes doing interviews with people, and that can be really tricky. So you might think about a skill that you have that could relate to that. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Well, if anything comes up, feel free to just drop it in the chat or unmute and ask, and we can always go back to this question too. Okay, so question 4, describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. So this one is a little trickier. So we're going to take a little more time to respond to it. So to respond to the first part, significant educational opportunity, I want you to make a list of any college programs or opportunities that you took advantage of. So this could be anything from EOPS to Puente to Big E to Trio to any clubs that you were a part of, like maybe you were part of the like Poetry and Prose Club, or gosh, we have so many clubs on our campus. I think there's like a fine art club. I think there's like a gaming club. So like maybe you were involved in some sort of club. Any field trips that you went on with a particular class. And this also could have, I think, be like things that you did outside of school to take advantage of opportunities that were related to your education. Maybe you had tutoring or something like that. So that's in response to the first part. And in response to the second part, make a list of any educational barriers you've had to cross on your academic journey. So maybe these were financially related, issues with financial aid. COVID is a significant educational barrier that everyone had to go through. So that's definitely something you can address in this application. Maybe you had to work full time while you were also going to school, or you had to work a lot. Maybe you had to care for siblings. Maybe you had to care for parents. There's a lot of different ways to approach that second part. So we're going to take about 5-ish minutes now and make a list of any programs or opportunities first, and second, any educational barriers. And again, COVID is a pretty obvious one you can address. Okay, does anyone have any examples they want to share or any questions about this one? Okay, so I'll just say a couple things. So I think how I would answer this, I would focus on the educational barrier portion for at least my own experience. I had to work multiple jobs all through my education, and that was really challenging. And so I would also, though, present that as an opportunity for me to really become very organized and good at time management, which I am to this day. And so it's taking something that was negative, but also showing how I overcame that and developed a new skill in response to it. This is also an opportunity to provide context, like the video said. So if there's something in your transcript you're not super stoked about, like, oh, I could have done better in that specific math class, but there's a specific educational barrier that relates to why you maybe didn't do as well as you would have liked. This is your opportunity to explain maybe that low grade or an issue on your transcript in some other way, or something that's not really addressed in another part of your application. So I would say, remember, these are all opportunities to provide context, and specifically this question gives you the opportunity to address maybe a low grade or something like that, that you haven't had the opportunity to talk about otherwise. Okay, any questions? All right, okay, let's move on to the next one. All right, so question 5. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So this one is kind of similar to the last question in some ways. So maybe if you do 4 and 5, you choose to focus on educational opportunities for 4 and focus on the challenge for 5. If I had, or maybe there's more than one challenge and you address 1 in 4 and another one in 5. Okay, so to start brainstorming for this one, go ahead and make a list of any significant life challenges you've had. Again, COVID is very much on the table, especially if you were, in high school when COVID is going on. That is it's going to have a tremendous impact on your education and your life experience. So, any challenges you've had, this doesn't necessarily have to connect to school, but you do need to show some sort of reflection if you write this essay. So going back to the tips we went over at the beginning, you don't want it to just be negative. You want to reflect on how you've grown from that experience. So if you do talk about COVID, you want to reflect now, what have you done in college since that has happened? How have you grown? How have you addressed the challenge in a positive way, or at least in a productive way? Okay, so go ahead and brainstorm some of those challenges and think about how you might address growth from that challenge. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. All right, so I'll again just point to like context, right? Especially like the last part of this question, how has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So again, if there's some sort of, maybe there's a gap in your educational history where you took a year off school, or there's a low grade or something in your transcript or some inconsistency you want to address by talking about that challenge. This is an opportunity to do that. But just really make sure that overall you show that sense of reflection and growth from that period. So maybe you had to take a year off school because you had to work full time to help provide for your family. Then you went back to school and did well. So focus on the fact that like you were able to move on from that situation, move forward, and continue to succeed, even though there is that gap in your transcript. So this is just another opportunity to provide that context. Again, you don't have to answer every single question. So maybe this one isn't a good fit, but definitely if there is something in your transcript you want to address, this is a good question to answer. Okay. Other questions about that? All right, moving on. Question 6. What have you done to make your school or your community a better place? So for this one, I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and make a list of how you've tried to make your community or school a better place. Remember, community is not just geographical. It could be your church community, your community in the classroom, your community of friends. Maybe you have a friend who's moved away, and so every month you organize a Zoom call so that friend doesn't feel left out or lonely. That's a way that you can make the world a better place. So there's lots of different ways to answer this. So I'll give you some time to sort of brainstorm, like, first of all, what is your community? Or like, how do you envision your involvement at the school, and how have you contributed to one or the other? Okay, so I think there's a lot of ways, like I said, to respond to this. Good examples are things like any sort of club involvement. Maybe you were part of a used book sale on campus to raise money for something. Any sort of community engagement like volunteer work would be a really good way to approach this. Maybe you helped with like a beach cleanup one weekend or something like that. So really try and think of like anything you've done to benefit the school or your community. You can also think of things you maybe have done in high school too. I think that's all applicable here as well. Okay.
I was gonna mention the food share. Like I participated in like the food shares at school.
Oh, perfect. That's a great example. Definitely. Good specific example too. Anyone else have anything they want to share? Okay, and then lastly, question 7. So beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admission to the University of California? So what is the thing that sets you apart from other students? It could be something unique you like to do in your free time. Maybe it's some artistic or creative endeavor. Maybe it's your engagement with the community. Maybe you're good at organizing people. What is the thing that makes you unique that you want them to know that they wouldn't know from the rest of your application? So this one, I think, requires a little bit of thought. So I'll give you a few minutes to make a list of anything you think could work for this response. What makes you unique? Okay. It can be hard to think of like, how am I different from every other applicant? But you want to think back to like specific examples from your experience. Everyone's life experience has been different. So how has yours shaped you as an applicant? What will you bring to the university because of your specific experiences? I think a strong approach to questions like this is always like, how will you now contribute to this community, right? It's not just about like, I'm so unique. It's sort of like, I'm so unique for these reasons, and here's how I will contribute that to the University of California. So if you are like really great at organizing people and bringing people together, like that's a skill that you have. It's unique to the group of people you've been around. Maybe it's unique to your college campus. What will you then do at the University of California that's evidence of that skill? So I was trying to think of it as like, this question in some ways is like, what will you give to us? Like, how will you contribute to the community here at the college you're applying for? So it's good to remember that portion of what they're kind of discreetly asking for as well. Any questions or thoughts you want to share, examples? Okay, so I'm going to go back through and just run through the questions one more time. And as I do so, I want you to know at least 3 of the optional prompts that you want to answer. So we'll return to obviously the first question, and then you'll choose the 3 others that you're going to spend a little more time on today. So I'll go back to obviously going to respond to this one. But what 3 other questions, based on the notes you've taken and the ideas you have, do you feel most comfortable responding to? Is it the leadership question? Is it the creative question? Is it the talent or skill question? The opportunity or barrier question? Significant challenge? Bettering your community or school? Or what makes you unique? So I'll let you think about that for a few minutes, and then I'll ask if you want to share which questions you've chosen. Okay, does anyone want to share their choices for which questions they plan to respond to? Okay, well, hopefully you have some ideas. We're going to spend the next bit of time now trying to think of some specific examples we could use in response to those questions. So hopefully you have 3 questions in mind in addition to the one required question. So the goal now is to go back through those questions you've chosen and add some specific stories and evidence. So for example, if we go back to the required question. So please describe how you've prepared for your intended major, including readiness to succeed in your upper division courses. So you might ask yourself, like, what is a specific story related to a classroom experience that led me to choose this major? So I could share that I started off as a nursing major, even though I really loved writing and reading. My family was encouraging me to do something more practical than major in creative writing. And so I did a whole year of courses intending to major in nursing. I did lots and lots of science classes, but at the same time, I was in my English 103 course, my critical thinking course, and I was reading and talking about literature, and I was writing all the time, and I really loved it. And even though that class was at 8 a.m., I was like early for it every week, because that classroom experience really just showed me that that was where I felt like I was home. And so I could talk about how then I changed my decision to major in English and creative writing. Even though it seemed less practical to the people around me, it was what I was really meant to do. So you might think of, if you have a specific classroom experience like that, or a specific teacher or a specific assignment that you did that really shows that you are passionate about this major. So that's one story or specific example to think of, but you'll want to come up with similar stories, specific examples, equally concrete for all of the questions you intend to answer. So I'll give you a little bit of time now to sort of take some notes on that and think through what stories and specific examples you might want to refer to in your responses. And if you have questions or want to run anything by me, just unmute, raise your hand, or you can drop it in the chat too, and I can respond that way. Okay, I'm going to drop the link to, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second, and I'm going to drop the link to the resources folder once more again in the chat. So definitely check that out. I'll share my screen one more time and show you some of the resources in there. So again, there's the transfer PDF from the UC Transfer Center with information. It has basically most of the information that I went over today, linked to the Prezi. So you just follow the link and it'll take you to the presentation I went through today if you need that to help you brainstorm. There's also a couple examples of successful personal insight questions. So question 1, we have a response to question 1 and another response to question 4, overcoming an educational barrier. So you're welcome to look through those and think about how those students were able to really concretely and specifically respond to those questions. And then other resources, just a lot of helpful resources that you can access. The link to today's Prezi again. And I go over some of these at the end of the Prezi. I'll show you in just a second, but you can follow those links. And I always, more than anything else, really recommend visiting the Writing Center at our campus. It's free to use. You just have to register for the Writing Center course. And faculty members like me are in there to help you with your applications, regardless of what step you're on. But then there's just some other free and sometimes paid services that you can access, but definitely make use of the Writing Center. We're also doing a lot of different workshops with the Writing Center over the course of the fall semester that can help with other aspects of your writing that could be beneficial in answering these questions. So that is all from me for today. If you have any questions, I'm here, so just hang around and ask me. Oh, I think I forgot to share my email address. Sorry about that. You can look at it on the Prezi yourself, but there's my email. I'm also in the Writing Centers on Mondays from 12 to 1. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to stop by during that time. You can also just email me and make an appointment too.
Thanks so much. That was really good information. Really quick before you everybody gets off, the Transfer Center will be offering the UC application workshop starting in October. There's a couple more of these planned if you want to come in person. I know there's going to be one in person. Tell your friends if they're doing any kind of applications with personal insight questions, writing, anything, they should be coming to this. But the applications tags open right now. So if you're doing the guarantee to any UC, make sure you come to one of our tag workshops. And then the actual UC application, that'll be happening October, November.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for offering this, Kacie. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, it's fun. Brings me back.
Use the Writing Center.
Yes, he's the writing center.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna head out, but thanks so much.
All right, thanks. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.